Hey now, today we are taking a look at Fairy Tale from Z-Man Games, or I should say that this is the newest Z-Man Games edition of this game. There have been a number of different reprints and prints of this game. I've actually owned a copy of it for quite a while called the What's Your Game edition. I just never got around to reviewing it, so I guess that's a spoiler that I must obviously like the game if I had the previous version and now I have the newest version, but anyways, the game has pretty much stayed the same through every incarnation. This game has a little bit better, clearer graphic design, but most of the artwork assets are still the same. There are some new cards to go along with it, and therefore some new gameplay variants, one of them which was apparently written by Richard Garfield of Magic the Gathering and King of Tokyo fame. But basically what the game is, it's kind of themeless. You are drafting cards. Think of the entire first part of Seasons, but without any of the extra stuff at the end. You're drafting cards, trying to collect different sets of cards and get points depending on which cards you've played. The artwork and everything is pretty fantasy based, but again, it's not really integrated well with the theme. But anyways, let me just give you a brief overview of the game, then we'll come back and I'll kind of explain why I like it and all the different facets of it. Alright, I'm going to go through a brief overview of the mechanics of Fairy Tale. Fairy Tale is kind of a themeless game, but it's like you've got these fantasy cards that I guess represent different factions, and you're trying to... it doesn't really matter. What matters is that you're trying to get the most victory points at the end of the game. And you need to get points through a variety of different methods, but let me just explain how the game actually works as far as the round-to-round card play. So at the beginning of the game, each player is going to get a hand of 5 cards from this main deck, and I will mention this now and go over them later, but there are expert cards and there are basic cards. You're going to decide at the beginning whether you want to play with all the expert cards, just the basic cards. That's your choice. But in either case, you're going to shuffle up the main deck of cards, deal 5 cards out to every player, and then you're going to begin the drafting process. And how it'll work is that you're going to do this over the course of 4 total rounds. So therefore, you'll have 4 drafts, and each draft, the first draft you'll go clockwise, second draft you'll go counterclockwise, and then back and forth and so on. Once if you're not familiar with card drafting, each player is going to take their hand of 5 cards, pick 1 card out of it, put it face down in front of them, then pass the remaining cards to the player to their either clockwise or counterclockwise, depending on the rounds. And you're going to keep doing this until you have a brand new hand of 5 cards. Then, going back in turn order, starting with that first player, you're going to actually play the cards as the second half of the rounds. Playing 1 card face up in front of you, doing whatever the ability is, then you'll do this simultaneously. So each player will choose one of the 5 cards from their hand, put it face down, flip it face up, and do whatever the ability calls for. Now, you're going to keep doing this until you've played 3 cards, so that means that two of the 5 cards that you drafted are not going to be used. Those are going to be placed face down back into a separate discard pile from the main deck. Then you're going to start a new round and continuing it all over again. Drafting cards first, then playing cards. And at the end of 4 rounds, you're going to add up the total of all the points you've earned from the cards you've played. But I haven't actually shown you the cards yet, so let me show you some examples of the different cards in the game. Now, the game is broken down into 4 different factions. You have the Fairy faction, which has the red bordered cards. You have the Holy Empire faction, which has these yellow cards. The Dragon faction, which has the green cards, and then the Shadow faction, which has the gray-black cards, which are also some of the most esoteric cards in the game and have some wildly differing abilities. So, alright, that's better. So I'll show you a little bit about what some of the cards do. Now, each card has basically their analogs of different colors. So, for instance, I'll show you this red Mischievous Fairy card, but there's also a green version of this card that works essentially the same, called the Child of the Dragon, or the Baby Dragons, and the mechanic basically works the same. Now, for the Mischievous Fairy, at the end of 4 rounds, you're going to gain points equal to each of these fairies is worth the number of fairies you have in play. So if you only have the 1 fairy in play, she's worth 1 point. But if you have 2 fairies in play, both fairies are going to be worth 2 points. 3 fairies, each one will be worth 3 points, and so on. And the Children of the Dragon card works the same way, except it's with the dragon cards. Now, each faction has one of these cards, which is worth a lot of points, or 6 points up at the top, But once you flip it over the first time when you're playing the cards, you have to flip over another card with the Holy Empire symbol, which, if you don't even have another Holy Empire symbol in play, might be this card. So you might flip it over and have to flip it over again. But what you'll do is you'll hope that you'll get another card that will let you flip it over. For instance, this Silver Dragon card, which is for the green faction. If you flip this card over, it's only worth a measly 1 point at the end of the game, but it does let you unflip one of your green cards, which could be a very high point card you had to flip over from before. Now, some cards work together. Cards that work together are always going to have this little handshake symbol down in the bottom. Now, the Knight of the Round Table here, and again, the other factions have analogs to this card, he is worth 3 points at the end of the game. But you see here, he works together with the Bronze Dragon. Now, the Bronze Dragon from the green faction, he is worth a number of points of 3 times the number of the bronze knights that you, or Knight of the Round Table that you have. So if you have one Knight of the Round Table in play, he's going to be worth 3 points. But if you had 2 of them, then each one of these dragons would be worth 6 points. So that could be a lot of points if you get the right cards in your hands. Now, the Shadow faction is a little unusual. The Shadow faction cards do a number of different things, and just a couple of examples. The Dark Angel card is worth -1 points of the game, but you are allowed to unflip any 2 cards when you flip her over. The werewolf is worth 2 points, but all players, including yourself, must flip down a Holy Empire card. And there's other cards like Demon and Vampire for the other factions as well. So the black cards can be pretty much like attack cards or just do some esoteric things to help you out. Now, I did mention that there are expert cards in the game, and it's your choice whether you shuffle these in or use them or not, and they do a variety of different things. The Egg of Chaos is actually unique to this newest printing of the game, I believe, and basically you flip this card over, it counts as 2 points, and it also counts as either Children of the Dragon, Mischievous Fairy, or Homesteaders. Basically any of the 3 cards that actually, and it counts as all faction symbols as well, but it basically can count as any of the 3 cards that have a number of points equal to how many of them there are. Here are some of these, what I would call achievement cards. So for instance, Shadowbringer's Tale, Chapter 3. You will gain 7 points if you have the most tail cards, so the books with, or the symbols with the books inside of them. This card here, from the Shadow faction, 4 points, and you get to draw 2 cards from the main deck. The Fairy Queen, she has a... she's worth 3 points at the end of the game. She has Hunt All Shadow. What the Hunt ability means is that once everyone flips over their turn, or their card for the playing turn, she will immediately cancel out any of the shadow effects cards that have been put into play. So she'll cancel it. So if someone flipped over a shadow card, she'll cancel the ability. And here's another one of those achievement cards where you can score 9 points if you are the one that has the Fairy Queen in play. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Another achievement card, you score 6 points if you have the most shadow cards. Another one, you score 8 points if you have at least 2 fairies and 2 Holy Empire cards. And there's other analogs of that card as well with different factions involved. And here's one of the coolest shadow cards, the Trickster, who has the Almighty ability. It's worth -1 points at the end of the game, but you may, when you're scoring points at the end of the game, you can say that he has whatever name, he or she, I don't know, has whatever name you want them to have. So you can have them count as another one of your fairies for getting points, as a bronze dragon, as a knight, whatever you want it to be, that's what it is. So that's basically Fairy Tale. No matter which cards you use, you're drafting them, and then you're going to play them, and you're going to try to make sets of different types of cards in order to get the most points at the end of 4 rounds. Card drafting is a mechanism that I really, really love. I wouldn't say it's my favorite part of Seasons. My favorite part of Seasons is just, you know, playing all the cards and getting all the combos out, but that card draft aspect adds a very, very, very cool element to it. And I would say that Fairy Tale is card drafting as a board game mechanic in like its purest, rawest form. There's a couple of interesting ways that it goes about. I mean, you draft the cards, but then you play them, and you draft 5, but you don't play all 5. You only play 3, and that adds a little bit of an interesting twist to it. It is an interactive game. I mean, you are trying your best to complete your objectives, the different sets of cards you're trying to get, whether it's trying to have the most fairies or trying to have your dragons matched up with your knights and all of that kind of stuff. But at the same time, you're trying to pay attention to what your opponents have because you don't want them to get all of their awesome combos as well. It doesn't matter how well you do. It doesn't matter how well you accomplish what you're trying to do. If your opponents are doing just awesome and getting these tremendous combos and they just have, like, you know, 5 fairies or however many are in the deck, you're going to get destroyed. So sometimes you need to do what they call hate drafting, which is taking a card just to keep it out of your opponent's hands, even if you have no intention of playing it for yourself. It's one of your dump cards for that round of drafting. And that's a cool thing, I think. I mean, it adds a little bit of interaction that I think this game would have been sorely missing otherwise, and I think it's kind of what's missing in more grandiose card drafting games like Seven Wonders. Now, Seven Wonders has that whole combat aspect with the military, but I don't know, that always kind of felt clunky to me. It felt like it was sort of, if you were still doing well and doing what you're supposed to be doing, you could sort of overcome that. Whereas in this game, it's, you know, it's very light and it's very fast, so every decision feels very, very crucial and critical as you go from round to round. And speaking of that, I think that the sort of the speed of this game and how light it is, to me, it's an asset. I think that some people don't like the game because it is very light and there's not a tremendous amount of strategy in it, but I think of this game as a filler game, but towards the heavier end, and I like that. I like those kind of games. I think there's enough meat here to make it interesting. Now, the variants that come with the game, well, some of the stuff is just, there's what they call the expert cards, and a lot of those are not new to the game. Basically, they're like different achievements you can work towards. I think that those are very cool, and it's definitely something you're going to play with after you've played a couple of times, but it's not necessary. I think that you could definitely bust this game out and play with the basic cards and still have a good time right off the bat, and the expert challenges are just sort of something you can add to have fun with it. The new cards like the Trickster and the Chaos Egg, these are very cool as well. But again, it's just throwing more of the same in, just more, nothing changes the game drastically, but it is fun to have those. I mean, if you don't own this game yet and it interests you and you think you might want to purchase it, and it's not a very expensive game by any means, this is definitely the game to get. I mean, all the art is the same, so it's clearly a superior version. If you already own a copy of the game, especially the previous version, the What's Your Game edition, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's really worth buying just for that. The games, you know, the team variant, which is I think what Richard Garfield developed, you can just get online, I'm pretty sure. So it's not really a necessary purchase. But again, if you haven't owned a copy, this is definitely the copy to get. It's not a perfect game. Some people are not going to like the lightness of it, and you know, it's still a little bit random because, you know, you might just, there are terrible rounds of Fairy Tail. There are rounds where you just do not get what you need, and you see that everyone else is just loading up on the cards that they needed and just crushing you. But on the other hand, it's over so fast that I think there's a lot of fun to be had. I love the artwork. I wish they had changed it for this edition, but that's what it is. The card quality is good. I think this is a very good medium weight filler game, if that's a proper term. But check it out. I think it's definitely worth a try, especially if you like card drafting in other games. My name is Nick. This has been Board Game Brawl, and I'm reminding you to get out there and game every day in every way. Take care.